Good evening, dear listener. Find a cozy spot, perhaps tuck your blanket just a little tighter, pour yourself a calming cup of tea, and gently rest your head on your pillow. Take a deep breath, feeling the air fill your lungs, and then slowly exhale, releasing the day's weight. Allow yourself to settle into this quiet moment as the world outside softly fades away. Tonight, I invite you to journey into a story that whispers through the shadows of time, a tale where the mundane becomes mysterious and the ordinary transforms into the extraordinary. Imagine a world where the relentless frustration of waiting in endless lines isn't just about bank visits or coffee shops, but something far more tangled, like trying to untie a knot that's been pulled tight by centuries of unseen hands. Or picture the sensation of notifications blinking endlessly on a screen. Only here, the signals are whispers of water, flowing, blocking, and sometimes vanishing into the darkness beneath the streets. As you listen, you might feel a faint fog curling around your thoughts, shadows dancing just beyond your perception, and a gentle wind carrying whispers from a distant past. This is a place where the invisible struggles of daily life are woven into a tapestry of peculiar ingenuity and quiet resilience. You're about to step into a world both strange and familiar, where the air is thick with stories and secrets waiting patiently to be uncovered. And as your eyes grow heavy, you'll soon wake not in your bed, but in a place where the air is thick with smoke, herbs, and fear. A world where the challenges are far stranger than anything you've known, yet somehow still oddly comforting. The air is thick and heavy, tinged with a muddled scent of smoke, damp earth, and something sharper. Perhaps the faint sting of herbs burned to chase away disease, or maybe just the smell of sweat and unwashed linen. As your eyelids flutter open, you see a ceiling of dark, uneven wood beams, their surfaces scarred with age, nestled under a faint flicker of torchlight that casts long, dancing shadows across the small, cramped room. The walls are made of wattle and daub, uneven and fragile, decorated with odd objects. An old, cracked mask with a long beak, jars filled with dried herbs, and a rusty iron contraption that once may have been a lock or a hinge. The scent of burnt herbs mixes with something more pungent, perhaps vinegar or spoiled meat, creating an aroma that makes your stomach turn. You shift uncomfortably, feeling the coarse, itchy fabric of your rough woolen shirt against your skin, the fibers scratching as you move, and the cold stone floor beneath your feet, uneven and cracked, pressing unkindly against your soles. A shiver runs down your spine, not from cold necessarily, but from the strange, raw sensation of being somewhere so rooted in the past. Your idea of a bad morning used to be forgetting your phone charger or spilling coffee on your favorite shirt. Here, it's realizing that your mask smells worse than the patients you're meant to help, if you're even sure what role you're supposed to play in this place. You sit up, slowly, your muscles stiff from the night's rest, and reach for a rough cloth to wipe the sweat from your brow. Before you stand, you grasp a small cup of water, murky and tepid, the taste faintly metallic and bitter, as if the very water you drink has absorbed the dirt of 1,000 years. You take a sip, grimacing at its stale flavor, then rise unsteadily to your feet. Your first step is to open a door, if you can call it that. It's a heavy wooden panel, half hinged on rusted iron fittings, creaking ominously as you push it aside. Outside, the world greets you with a cacophony of sounds. The village is alive in the early morning, distant bells ringing, their clangs echoing off stone walls, mingled with the dull roar of voices from the marketplace. You hear the clang of blacksmiths at their anvils, the squeal of pigs in pens, and the soft murmurs of women bargaining over fresh produce. Somewhere nearby, children's laughter, rough and carefree, bubbles up amidst the shouts of merchants and the clatter of carts. The air is thick with smells, the smoky aroma of fires burning wood and coal, the sharp tang of fresh herbs drying in the sun, mingled with the heavier scent of manure and damp earth. You catch a whiff of something sour, perhaps the vinegar used to preserve food or the sweat of labouring men. All around you, the cobblestone streets are uneven, pocked with ruts and puddles, and the buildings lean slightly as if tired from centuries of leaning into the wind. As you take in this busy scene, you realize how different it all is from your modern life. Your idea of a frustrating morning might involve a slow Wi-Fi connection or a missed email. Here, your daily struggles involve clogged pipes, leaky gutters, and the constant worry that the village well might run dry. It's a world where water isn't just a click away, it's a precious resource fought over, spilled, and sometimes painfully hard to get. And yet amid the chaos and the dirt, there's a strange comfort, a rhythm, a resilience. You notice a woman in a rough-spun dress, her hands busy repairing a woven basket. A soldier clad in chainmail stands guard near the marketplace, eyeing the crowd with cautious vigilance. A priest, robed in simple white linen, moves through the crowd murmuring prayers, his voice barely more than a whisper over the din. People glance at you with a mixture of curiosity and respect, perhaps wary of the unfamiliar clothes you wear or the strange mask you carry, a bizarre contraption that looks more like a relic than a tool. They are used to hard times here, but your presence is a reminder that something different has entered their world, a visitor from a future where plumbing and plumbing failures are mere annoyances compared to the ancient, tangled problems of water and waste. You feel a strange sensation, part awe, part humor, as you realize how fragile this life is, how easily it could be upended by a clogged drain or a broken pipe. In this place, every drop of water is fought for, every flush a small victory. And yet somehow they carry on, resilient, inventive, quietly enduring. As you look around, taking it all in, the worn stones, the flickering torches, the rough voices, you sense that to truly understand this world, you need to step back and see the bigger picture. The story behind these walls, these streets, is woven into a vast tapestry of survival and ingenuity, stretching far beyond what your modern mind can yet grasp. And with that thought, you realize you're only just waking up in a world where the struggles are far older, far stranger, and yet somehow still strangely human. The era you've woken up in is the 14th or early 15th century, a period marked by the tumult of kingdoms and the shadows of plagues, where the world teeters between the familiar and the mysterious. Think of it as a vast patchwork quilt of kingdoms, city-states, and scattered villages, all buzzing with life but stitched together by a fragile understanding of order and chaos. You're somewhere in Western Europe, perhaps in a bustling town or a quiet village, where the landscape is dotted with stone walls, wooden towers, and winding dirt roads that look more like tangled veins than orderly pathways. This is the age of knights and monasteries, of castles and cathedrals that scrape the sky, casting long shadows over crowded markets and narrow alleyways. The social structure here is a complex web of hierarchies. At the very top, the monarchs sit on thrones, sometimes real kings or queens, sometimes powerful lords and barons, ruling over vast lands with a mixture of might, diplomacy, and divine right. Beneath them, the clergy hold sway over both spiritual and political matters, their voices echoing through the stone halls of churches and monasteries. The clergy's influence is so pervasive that it's almost impossible to separate faith from daily life. Prayers and superstitions intertwine with every decision. Then there are the merchants and craftsmen, those clever enough to turn raw materials into goods, trading spices, cloth, or rare metals, often in bustling market squares that are louder than any modern Black Friday, but with more pigs than people wandering through. Below them, the peasants and serfs toil in fields, their lives dictated by seasons and the whims of landowners, their days spent ploughing, tending animals, and waiting for the next harvest, if they're lucky enough to have one. The divide between rich and poor here is as stark as a castle's high walls compared to a mud brick hut. Nobles wear fine wool and silk, adorned with jewelry and embroidered robes, living in stone keeps with thick walls and grand halls. Meanwhile, most of the population lives in simple homes made of wattle and daub, their rooms smoky from open fires, their clothes rough and patched, their days filled with hard labor. Wealth and power are often concentrated in the hands of a few, those who can wield land, influence, or divine favor, while the majority scrabble to survive, their fortunes determined as much by luck and connections as by effort. In this world, even the simplest decision whether to send a child to school or buy a better coat can feel like an act of rebellion or devotion, depending on your station. Looking beyond the immediate scene, the landscape itself is a patchwork of contrasts. Fields are often muddy and churned from ploughing, dotted with cropland and grazing animals. Villages cluster around a central church or marketplace, their inhabitants busy with chores that seem both timeless and oddly peculiar. The streets are lined with wooden stalls and carts piled high with produce, all crowding around a stone square where markets are noisier than any modern shopping mall, more shouting, more bargaining, and probably more pigs. The churches rise above everything else, their bell towers piercing the sky, summoning townsfolk at dawn and again at dusk, their chimes echoing through the air like the heartbeat of the entire community. The rhythm of life here is relentless, dictated by natural cycles and religious observances. People wake with the sunrise or the ringing of church bells, sometimes both, then set about their daily routines. Farmers tend to their fields, blacksmiths hammer away at glowing iron, and women weave cloth or tend to children. The days are filled with repetitive, often exhausting chores, fetching water from wells, chopping wood, grinding grain, each task a small act of perseverance. Taking a bath, funnily enough, was a suspicious activity, almost like announcing to the neighbors that you were planning something shady. Instead, people would wash sparingly, often just rinsing themselves in basins or standing in a stream, mindful of the cold or the shame of appearing too clean. Personal hygiene was a matter of necessity rather than comfort, and soap was a luxury few could afford. Now I invite you to imagine how your frustrations, waiting in line for hours, dealing with a slow Wi-Fi connection, or fumbling with tangled earbuds, seem almost trivial compared to the daily struggles of these medieval folk. Forget about modern gyms. Carrying buckets of water every day was the medieval equivalent of CrossFit. Your idea of a bad morning might have been waking up to find the miller's wheel broken, or the town's main well clogged with debris, leaving everyone thirsty and irritable. Here, survival is a continuous effort, built on resilience, ingenuity, and a shared understanding that life can be as unpredictable as the weather. The world you've woken up in is ruled by kings and queens, but also by superstition and the divine. The political landscape is fractured into kingdoms and duchies, often at war over borders or resources, wars that can last decades or be over in a matter of days, depending on the luck of alliances and the strength of armies. The authority of monarchs is both absolute and fragile, sustained by divine right and the loyalty of their vassals. The Church's power is equally immense, shaping laws, morals, and even the worldview of the populace. Superstitions abound, believing that carrying a handful of onions could ward off the plague, or that the flicker of a candle in a storm was a message from God. People are enveloped in a web of beliefs that blend faith, fear, and hope into a tapestry of daily rituals and taboos. And yet, for all its chaos, this is a world that can surprise you with its absurdities. Some believed that sniffing flowers soaked in vinegar was safer than keeping their distance from others, masks, but make it medieval. Others swore that wearing a certain amulet or reciting a prayer could ward off the worst of the plagues. These strange, sometimes humorous customs reflect a deep human desire to control the uncontrollable, to find comfort amid uncertainty. As you settle into this scene, it's clear that the world you've woken up in is a delicate balance of hardship and hope, of superstition and resilience. And to truly grasp where you are, you'll need to step back and see the bigger picture, the vast, interconnected story of a society shaped by faith, power, survival, and the relentless pursuit of life amid chaos. The world you've entered isn't just a snapshot of history, it's a living, breathing mosaic waiting patiently for you to explore its cracks, its quirks, and its quiet strengths. And as you prepare to descend further into this story, remember, beneath the dirt and the danger lies a remarkable human spirit, enduring as fiercely as the stones of the castles rising above the fields. You wake gently, your body still heavy with sleep, yet the day calls you to start, though not with the buzz of an alarm clock or the soft chime of a modern ringtone. Instead, the faint glow of dawn filters through small, uneven windows, casting patches of muted light across the rough-hewn wooden walls of your humble abode. As you stretch, your muscles protest slightly, stiff from a night spent on a mattress filled with straw, or perhaps just a pile of old hay, the rough fibers prickling against your skin. Your first instinct is to find water, the simplest act of hygiene in this world, and you reach out to a nearby basin, perhaps carved from wood or earthenware, its surface rough and cool beneath your fingertips. You dip your hands into the water, feeling the chills seep through your skin, a bracing awakening that reminds you just how different this is from your modern, temperature-controlled bathroom. The water is murky, slightly cloudy from the dirt, and minerals it's absorbed overnight. Yet it's enough to splash onto your face, to rinse the sleep from your eyes, and to wash away the lingering dreams of a world that's long gone. You grab a coarse, woven towel, more burlap than terry cloth, and pat your face dry, the fabric rough and unforgiving, but familiar in its simplicity. There's no fragrant soap here, no foaming gel or scented lotion, just a splash of water and a prayer that the smell doesn't offend the neighbors, or worse, attract unwanted attention from the local healer or the village gossip. Many folks believe that bathing too often was suspicious, a sign of vanity or even a threat to health, so most prefer to keep things as minimal as possible. Instead, they rely on herbs, vinegar, or a sprinkle of fragrant dried flowers to purify the air and mask any odors. You might see a jar of vinegar nearby or a bundle of dried rosemary, their pungent scents filling the small space with a sharpness that's both cleansing and a little overwhelming. Forget your 10-step skincare routine. Here, survival is splashing some water and hoping the smell doesn't scare the neighbors or your own reflection. Stepping back, you notice the interior of your home, simple, functional, and worn with age. The walls are darkened by smoke from the flickering fireplace, which crackles softly as it consumes logs of seasoned oak, or perhaps some leftover wood from last week's chopping. The ceiling beams are rough, splintered in places, and the air is tinged with the scent of burning wood, a familiar aroma that's both cozy and slightly oppressive. The furniture is sparse, a sturdy wooden table scarred with knife marks, a chair or two with splintered edges, and a small shelf holding clay pots, a rusty iron pot, and perhaps a few utensils carved from bone or horn. Every surface seems to carry the weight of countless years, each scratch, dent, and burn mark telling a story of daily life, of meals cooked, children played, and chores endured. You feel the texture of the worn leather of your shoes, stiff from use, and the coarse fabric of your tunic, thick and itchy, designed to withstand the cold and the dirt, not to pamper or impress. Your body reacts with a familiar itch, a slight chill, and a rigidity from sleeping in clothes that feel more like a hug from a porcupine than a comfort. Your idea of uncomfortable might be a scratchy sweater. Here, it's wool that feels like hugging a hedgehog, rough and prickly against your skin. After freshening up, your stomach reminds you it's time for breakfast, though what's available is hardly what you'd call appetizing by modern standards. You peel off a piece of hard, dry bread, the crust crackling as you bite into it, paired with a slice of aged cheese that's more mold than dairy, or perhaps a small bowl of thin, lukewarm broth that tastes of herbs and a hint of something metallic. The flavors are simple, earthy, and honest, nothing like the carefully crafted coffees or smoothies you're used to. Eating here is less about indulgence and more about necessity, each bite a small act of endurance, a nod to the resilience that sustains this world. Of course, no routine would be complete without some ritualistic attempt at purification. You might clutch a small amulet, perhaps a carved stone or a twisted piece of metal, believed to ward off illness or evil spirits. You could recite a prayer, murmur a blessing, or sprinkle a pinch of dried herbs over your head, hoping to keep disease at bay. Some folks burn a bit of incense, smoke curling lazily upward, filling the air with a scent that's both fragrant and slightly ominous, an offering to the spirits or a simple way to mask the less pleasant odors of everyday life. For those wearing masks, they might have stuffed their nostrils with herbs or soaked cloth in vinegar, trying to keep the unseen horrors of disease out of their lungs. These practices, strange and quaint to modern sensibilities, are woven into every aspect of daily life, rituals that blend superstition with necessity, hope with a dash of desperation. As you stand within this space, your humble home, your skin prickles from the cold, your clothes itch, and the faint aroma of smoke and herbs lingers in your nostrils. You can feel the textures around you, the roughness of the wooden beams, the dampness of the stone floor, the coarse weave of your clothes. Every breath is a reminder of how different life is here, how survival depends on resilience, ingenuity, and a stubborn refusal to give in to despair. It's a world where hygiene is a ritual, a prayer, a hope, more than a routine, and where the body's comfort is secondary to the ongoing battle to stay healthy and alive. Now that you've begun your morning, washed, dressed, and fortified with a modest meal, you're ready to step outside. The world awaits with all its noise, its struggles, and its strange, enduring charm. But for now, take a moment to appreciate the quiet, the textures, and the simple act of cleansing, an act that, in this time, is both a necessity and a small act of rebellion against the chaos of life. Because in this world, even the smallest routines like washing your face or tying your shoes are moments of quiet resilience, tiny victories in a life that's often anything but easy. You step out of the small, dim interior of your dwelling, and immediately the world feels different, brisk, alive, and layered with a sense of purpose that's both grounding and slightly overwhelming. The air is sharp with the scent of dew-damp earth and the faint, smoky aroma of the nearby hearth. A cool breeze brushes past you, carrying with it whispers of the day's labor ahead. The ground beneath your feet is uneven, sometimes muddy, sometimes packed dirt or rough cobblestones. Each step a reminder that even walking is a small act of resilience. The sky above is a pale grey, or perhaps tinged with the orange glow of dawn, casting long shadows that stretch across the village or town square. You're already dressed in your work attire, perhaps a heavy tunic, sturdy leather boots, and that distinctive mask with the long beak, filled with herbs and aromatic plants, designed to ward off unseen threats. You carry a small leather bag, a bundle of dried herbs, and a wooden staff or brush, tools of your trade, clinking softly as you move. Today, your role is clear, yet vital, to serve, to tend, to diagnose, or perhaps to enforce the rules of health and hygiene in this tightly knit community. The community's expectations are strict. Your presence commands a mixture of respect, suspicion, and sometimes fear. Children stare at you, half curious, half terrified, eyes wide as they clutch their mother's skirts. The village elders nod slowly, with a mix of reverence and wariness, knowing that your role is intertwined with their survival. The merchants and farmers, busy setting up their stalls, glance your way, some with a hint of sarcasm, others with gratitude, depending on whether you're helping to identify a sickness or simply passing through. Soldiers, clad in chainmail or rough-spun cloaks, eye you with a cautious respect, their hands often resting on blades or bows, ready for trouble, though today most of their attention is on patrol or training exercises. Religious figures, robed and solemn, cross themselves or murmur prayers whenever you come near, as if your very presence might carry the contagion you're tasked to contain. You weave through the bustling scene, your footsteps echoing softly on the gravel and mud, the sounds of chatter, livestock, and the distant clang of blacksmiths working forging tools blending into a constant hum of life. Your work today involves a series of essential duties: visiting homes, examining the sick, inspecting the bodies of those who've fallen, and offering herbal remedies or prayers. Each task is a sensory journey: the smell of boiling herbs and vinegar in the sick room, the roughness of linen against skin, the weight of a freshly cut twig used as a makeshift thermometer, or the satisfying crackle of a fire as you burn contaminated clothing. You might poke and prod, listening to coughs that rattle like stones in a jar, feeling the heat radiate from fevered brows, or observing the color of a patient's tongue, each detail a vital clue in this delicate puzzle. The air is thick with a mixture of scents, dried herbs, burnt offerings, and the faint metallic tang of blood, each carried on the breeze that seems to whisper warnings and hopes alike. Your emotions swing between a sense of duty and a quiet humor at the absurdity of it all. Forget your emails piling up, you think. Here, the backlog is a line of coughing patients waiting outside your door. Your office might be a simple, communal space, an open-air square, a corner of the churchyard, or a humble chamber filled with jars, amulets, and scrolls. The walls are rough, the wooden benches splintered, the candle flames flickering with every gust of wind. The smell of smoke and wax mixes with the scent of damp wool and old leather, creating a comforting, if somewhat pungent, aroma. You wear your uniform of the day, thick woolen tunic, rough trousers, and the mask, each piece a symbol of your role. Your hands, calloused from years of diagnosing and treating, move with practiced care, feeling for signs of illness in the pulse or the color of the skin. Sometimes your body reacts with a shiver or a scratch, wool that feels like hugging a hedgehog, or leather that's stiff and unforgiving. You're acutely aware of how different this is from your modern routines. No quick visits to the pharmacy, no sterile gloves, no high-tech instruments. Here, each task is performed with patience, a mixture of observation, superstition, and a dash of hope. You might burn herbs in a small brazier, watching the smoke curl upward, a ritual believed to purify the space or keep the disease at bay. Some practitioners carried a cane, not just for support, but for poking at patients from a safe distance, or perhaps to point at the latest sick room. Others thought that smoking dried herbs from a special pipe inside the mask, or soaking cloths in vinegar, might help ward off the pestilence, like medieval aromatherapy, but with more risk of inhaling burnt herbs or stale air. Your movements are deliberate, your mind a swirl of responsibility and curiosity. Every interaction, every examination is a small act of faith, faith in herbs, prayers, and the collective strength of the community. Children run past, squealing and laughing, oblivious to the weight of your duties, while elders watch quietly, their eyes filled with a mixture of trust and suspicion. The marketplace hums with activity, merchants shouting, animals bleating, women bargaining over their wares, each voice adding to the vibrant, chaotic tapestry of life. The rhythm of the community is relentless, the daily grind of toil, the seasonal festivals, the religious processions that wind through the streets, and the occasional ritual to ward off evil spirits or ensure a good harvest. You are a part of this intricate dance, a vital link in the chain of life and death, hope and fear. And behind every busy market stall and every wary glance, there's a deeper fear that shapes this world, a fear of unseen enemies, of divine wrath, and of the fragile thread that keeps everyone alive. To truly understand the life you're living, you have to step into their beliefs, their superstitions, their hopes, and their fears, because only then will you grasp why they treat you with a mixture of reverence, suspicion, and sometimes outright distrust. And as you prepare to face the day's work, remember, beneath the layers of dirt, sweat, and fear, there's an unyielding human spirit, a stubborn determination to survive, to heal, and to carry on amidst the chaos of this medieval world. It's in the way the churches are packed beyond capacity, the flickering candles casting shadows that dance across stone walls, and the distant peal of bells tolling mournfully for the dead. The atmosphere is thick with a silence that weighs more than the crowded streets. An unspoken acknowledgement that danger lurks just beyond sight, whether in the form of a creeping illness, a poor harvest, or divine punishment. Fear here isn't just an abstract feeling, it's an omnipresent force woven into every corner of daily life, shaping the very way people breathe and move. In the mornings, as you prepare for your tasks, whether tending to the sick, inspecting the town's water supply, or performing rituals, you notice how integral faith is to every act. Before you even set foot outside, you make the sign of the cross, your fingers tracing a quick, practiced gesture across your forehead, chest, and shoulders. It's a ritual as automatic as tying your shoes, an act that whispers, "Protect me," in a world where danger seems to lurk behind every shadow. People around you do the same, crossing themselves before entering a marketplace, kneeling in the dirt to pray for the health of their loved ones, or bowing their heads as monks chant hymns from the cloisters. The air inside churches is thick with the scent of incense, sweet, woody, and slightly acrid, clinging to your nostrils long after the candles flicker out. The glow of countless candles creates a flickering sea of light, casting a warm but fragile barrier against the darkness of uncertainty. Today, you might scroll through your social media feeds for comfort, scrolling past images of filtered sunsets or motivational quotes. Here, people clutch rosaries or worn amulets as if they were life jackets tossed into stormy seas. Such objects, crude carved stones, small wooden charms, or bits of cloth soaked in holy water, are believed to ward off evil spirits, or the miasma, that foul, invisible air that supposedly carries sickness. Some carry a dead toad in their pocket, an odd talisman believed to scare away the plague, while others whip themselves in the streets believing that pain and penitence might earn them divine mercy. It's the medieval version of essential oils, except with a slightly higher chance of accidental poisoning or bruised knuckles. As you move through the town or village, you can't help but notice how these fears bind the community or sometimes tear it apart. The threat of the plague is a shadow that unites and divides. Everyone is on edge, eyes darting nervously at strangers or those coughing in the marketplace. The fear of hunger, of war, of divine punishment, or of witches and heretics fuels suspicion like a slow-burning fire. Accusations are hurled with the fervor of a preacher at a pulpit. An outsider or a vulnerable neighbor can suddenly become a target. Rumors spread faster than wildfire, and lynch mobs sometimes gather, armed with torches and pitchforks, ready to chase down anyone suspected of consorting with the devil. You see villagers fleeing in panic, their faces pale with fear, or huddling in their homes, locking doors and windows, whispering prayers that seem to drown out the world's chaos. In this climate of constant danger, your role as a healer or religious figure is fraught with complexity. People look at you with a mixture of hope and suspicion, trusting you to save them from death, yet wary of your possible complicity in the curse. Children stare at you with wide, trembling eyes, clutching their mothers' skirts, their innocent faces reflecting the collective dread. Elderly villagers murmur prayers as you approach, clutching their rosaries tighter, while young men and women exchange nervous glances, wondering if the healer's words are a balm or a curse. You can sense the whispers. Is he truly here to help, or is he part of the curse? And the way they tighten their grip on their charms when you draw near. Some beliefs border on the bizarre. You've heard stories of people carrying a dead toad in their pocket to ward off the plague, or of those who whipped themselves bloody, hoping that their suffering might sway divine mercy. Others think that the blood of animals, perhaps a chicken's head or a lamb's heart, can purify the air or appease the spirits. It's almost humorous, in a way, how earnest and bizarre these rituals are. It's the medieval equivalent of essential oils, except with a slightly higher chance of causing a new problem than solving the old one. These fears aren't just individual, they're collective. The community is a tangled web of superstitions and shared anxieties. The fear of the pestilence isn't just about the disease itself, but about what it signifies: divine wrath, moral failing, or the wrath of unseen spirits. The fear unites the community in a fragile solidarity, but it also divides, creating factions that blame outsiders, heretics, or witches. You've seen accusations fly like arrows, an old woman accused of witchcraft after her cat was found near a sick child, or a man dragged from his home, accused of poisoning the well. Fleeing in mass, villagers leave behind their homes and possessions, driven by the need to escape the invisible enemy lurking just beyond sight. And yet, amidst this storm of fear, you hold a strange position. To some you are a savior, anointed by faith and tradition to heal and protect. To others, you are a part of the problem, perhaps even the source of their suffering, whether through misguided rituals or the mere act of standing at the crossroads of life and death. The villagers' eyes linger on you with suspicion, some praying silently when you pass, others whispering curses or warnings. You catch the glint of fear in their gaze, as if your presence alone might carry the contagion, or perhaps ward it off. You've heard odd tales that make you smile quietly, stories of people carrying tiny bones or amulets inscribed with Latin prayers, believing they could turn back the tide of death. Some thought that whippings in the streets, performed with whips made from the tails of animals, could earn divine mercy. Others believed that the mere act of walking backwards around their houses could confuse the spirits and keep the plague away. It's the medieval version of a self-care routine, except that here the risks of misstep are higher and the chances of accidental harm are just part of the package. Fear here is like smoke from 100 chimneys, ever present, seeping into every corner of life. It's a fog that dulls the senses yet sharpens the senses for danger. It's in the way people clutch their loved ones closer at night, in the way they double-check their doors and windows, or in the way they cross themselves before every task. It's in the hushed murmurs of prayers, the silent gestures of hope, and the frantic rituals performed in the shadows of the night. Fear is what keeps this world turning, sometimes in fits and starts, sometimes in frantic leaps, but always in the knowledge that the next moment could bring either salvation or ruin. And yet, even within this heavy atmosphere, there's a strange beauty, an unspoken resilience. People cling to their faith, their charms, and each other, as if these are the only things that can keep the darkness at bay. You can sense it in the way they look at you, part reverence, part suspicion, part desperate hope. They hold on to their beliefs, their superstitions, and their fears, because in a world where the air itself might be deadly, what else can they do but pray, believe, and hope? As you prepare to leave this space of shadows and whispers, remember, behind every prayer, every charm, and every frightened glance, there's a community trying to survive, fragile, human, and, surprisingly, resilient. And beyond the superstitions and fears, there are bonds, simple, complex, and utterly human, that keep life moving forward, even in the face of the invisible terror that haunts every breath. Because in the end, fear may be the unseen enemy, but hope is what keeps the heart beating in this medieval world. They lean on one another, not merely for bread or warmth, but for a kind of solace that only another heartbeat nearby can provide. In a world where death lurks behind every shadow and suspicion hangs thick in the air, it's the bonds of community that offer the tiniest flicker of hope. You see it in the way neighbors share a loaf of bread, passing it across the muddy street with hesitant smiles, or how families huddle together in their small shared homes, speaking in hushed voices about loved ones or the next ritual to keep the sickness away. That closeness can be comforting, yes, but it's also a cage, every family a small universe of obligations and secrets, where one misstep might turn a beloved child into a suspect or a neighbor into an enemy. Forget Netflix family dramas. Here, your cousin might literally sleep on the floor 2 feet from you every single night because space is scarce and trust even scarcer. It's a world where kinship is both a refuge and a prison, and the lines between love and duty blur under the weight of survival. Amidst this, small scenes of friendship flicker like candle flames, muted but persistent. You observe neighbors helping each other repair a roof, passing around a shared bottle of mead, or whispering advice over a flickering candle in a darkened room. Often these acts are quiet, almost secret, like sharing a moment of genuine kindness in a landscape riddled with suspicion. Yet, even in these fragile bonds, mistrust lurks. In times of plague, friendships can turn brittle. A whisper of suspicion about a cough or a stranger's arrival can undo months of camaraderie. The community's social fabric is woven with both warmth and dread, each act of kindness a potential vulnerability. And then there are the romances, tender, daring, or downright impossible. You might catch a quick glance across a smoky tavern where a young man's eyes linger on a girl's face as she blushes behind her veil. Or perhaps lovers exchange secret promises beneath the heavy drapes of a church, their fingers brushing briefly in a moment that feels both forbidden and divine. You'd smile at the thought because, in this world, Tinder swipes are replaced by furtive glances and the promise of a dance if the fiddles don't break. Courtship is a game of whispers and stolen moments, played out against a backdrop of suspicion and the ever-present threat of disease or social disgrace. Marriage isn't just a union of hearts, but a delicate negotiation, families arranging alliances like merchants trading goods, knowing that a single misstep could unravel everything in an instant. Within this complex web, hierarchies shape your relationships. Nobles look down with a mix of disdain and pride at the peasants working tirelessly in the fields, their lives measured by the rhythm of seasons and the whims of landowners. Clerigos, clergymen, stand as both spiritual guides and social authorities, their words carrying weight far beyond the church doors, yet also inspiring fear, because divine judgment is a constant threat. As a plague doctor or healer, you walk a fine line, respected by some as a bearer of salvation, yet feared by others as a possible conduit of the curse. Respect and suspicion dance around you like a restless breeze. A noble might tip their head in acknowledgement, offering a coin or a kind word, while a commoner might cross themselves nervously, whispering prayers that you're not the instrument of divine wrath. You've seen how rituals and social standing intertwine, an elaborate ballet of gestures, tokens, and silent judgments. And then there are the gatherings, community events that punctuate the grim routine with bursts of color and sound. You find yourself amidst processions winding through the cobbled streets, the air thick with the smell of roasted meats and fresh bread. Men and women wear their best cloaks and dresses, their faces painted with smiles and beads of sweat, as they sing along with the lively tune of a fiddle or the clang of a blacksmith's hammer. The scent of incense from the church blends with the smoke from fires cooking stews, aromas that cling to your clothes and linger long after the festivities end. You feel the rough touch of hands in greeting, the coolness of a stone altar during a ritual, and the heat of a shared cup of ale passed from hand to hand. You're part of this mosaic, an observer and participant, feeling the pulse of life in every cheer, every prayer, and every tear shed during funerals or farewells. But it's not all harmony. Rivalries simmer beneath the surface like embers waiting to ignite. You hear whispers about disputes over land, accusations of witchcraft, jealousies fueled by lost lovers or stolen cattle. The community, for all its warmth, can be a place of sharp tongues and sharper accusations. Fights break out over petty insults, an insult about a neighbor's cow or a whispered rumor about a wife's fidelity. Sometimes these disputes escalate into accusations of sorcery. An old woman's broomstick becomes a symbol of evil, and accusations of witchcraft can lead to brutal punishments, public shaming, or even execution. You've watched as innocent villagers are dragged through the mud, their lives forever changed by suspicion and fear. The social fabric is fragile, stitched together with shared stories and mutual dependence, but also torn apart by greed, envy, and the primal need for safety. Your role in this chaos is complicated. To some, you are a savior, a healer who might save a child from the grip of sickness or soothe a dying soul with prayers and herbs. To others, you are a suspicious figure, perhaps even part of the curse, with your strange masks and unfamiliar words. You catch the wary glances, the whispered prayers when you approach, and the subtle shift in the air as the community measures whether you are friend or foe. Sometimes they hand you small tokens, an onion, a feather, a prayer, believing these will ward off the evil you might unwittingly bring. Other times you hear the quiet, heavy accusations behind closed doors. He's just a charlatan, or he's the one spreading the sickness. You've heard odd tales, stories that make you smile despite yourself. Some villagers swear that carrying a tiny bone in your pocket keeps the evil away, or that wearing a hat made from the feathers of a crow wards off spirits. Others believe that whippings with a switch made from elderwood can earn divine mercy, or that walking backward around your house can confuse the spirits and keep the pestilence at bay. It's like a medieval version of a self-help routine, only with a much higher chance of accidental injury or bizarre superstition. All around you, the community exists in a constant state of tension, fear, and hope woven into every interaction. Fear, like smoke from 100 chimneys, drifts through the streets and alleys, seeping into the bones of the people. It's what makes them clutch their loved ones tighter at night, double-check their doors, or cross themselves at the slightest sign of trouble. It's what fuels the whispered gossip, the hurried prayers, and the frantic rituals performed in the shadows of the evening. But beneath all that, there's a strange, resilient warmth, a stubborn refusal to let despair completely swallow hope. People reach out to each other in small ways, knitting together a fragile tapestry of human connection that keeps the darkness at bay, if only for a little while. And you, standing at the crossroads of all this, can't help but feel it, this unbreakable human tendency to cling to one another, to love despite the risks, to hope when everything seems lost. Because in this brutal world, the bonds forged in fear, in faith, and in simple acts of kindness are what truly keep the fire of life burning bright. You might be just one person, but in a universe of suspicion and suffering, your presence, your touch, your words, your quiet acts of care becomes a small but vital anchor in the storm. And as you prepare to move on to face the next corner of this tangled web of human stories, remember, it's these relationships, these fleeting moments of connection that remind you there's still warmth amid the cold, still light behind the shadows, and hope, however faint, that the human spirit refuses to be extinguished. The surface is a rough-hewn plank, scarred and creased, covered with a patchwork of worn cloth and a few bread crusts that gleam softly with a thin film of oil. Nearby, battered trenchers, flat wooden plates, hold a simple stew of grains and root vegetables, simmering slowly over the embers of yesterday's fire. The faint vapor rises in delicate wisps, catching the subdued glow of the flickering morning sun, filtering through a small, shuttered window. The air is thick with the scent of boiled onions, dried herbs, sparse but fragrant, and a whisper of salt from preserved fish. It's enough to stir your appetite, even as hunger has long since become a familiar companion. You notice how, despite the modesty of this setting, every detail seems to speak of care, an effort to turn scarcity into a small feast. The wooden utensils are rough but functional. A carved spoon rests beside a small knife, slightly dulled from frequent use. Your fingers brush the coarse linen napkin, more a scrap of cloth than a refined accessory, yet it serves its purpose, wiping hands in hurried, practiced motions. Nearby, a basin of cool water, tinged with dirt and faintly bitter, awaits your wash. The ritual of cleaning your hands precedes the meal, a necessity that elevates a simple act into a moment of quiet dignity amid the daily grind. The menu of your routine is humble yet familiar, a thick pottage made from whatever grains and legumes are available, sometimes lentils, sometimes barley, stewed into a nourishing, if unremarkable, broth. A small wedge of coarse bread, baked in the communal oven, crumbles easily as you tear off a piece, its crust dark and crackling, hinting at the long hours it spent rising and baking. A slice of hard cheese, cured and salty, adds a touch of richness. Eggs, when they can be obtained, are boiled and served plain, their shells cracked open to reveal a firm, pale yolk. On days when the fish is fresh or preserved, a smoky filler might sit alongside, the saltiness sharpening the senses. The drinks are simple, clay cups filled with weak ale, its bitter tang a reminder of the fermentation process, or water that tastes of earth and stone, sometimes tinged with a faint metallic bitterness from the well. The contrast between your modest meal and the sumptuous feasts of the town's nobility is stark. The elite dine on roasted meats, pigeons, hares, or even venison, seasoned with costly spices like pepper or saffron, their tables laden with fruits, dried and fresh, almonds and sweet confections that seem almost out of place amid the austerity. Their goblets gleam with fine wine, while your simplest drink is poured from a battered jug, an everyday sustenance that sustains and dulls the hunger, but never the longing for more. At the table, a quiet set of rules governs the ritual. Before eating, you cross yourself, an act of devotion, a plea for blessing, and wash your hands carefully, mindful of the dirt and grime that clings stubbornly. The order of service reflects your place in the hierarchy. The head of the household or the eldest begins, offering a brief prayer, a moment of shared gratitude. Portions are measured, not too much, lest waste be seen as a sin, and everyone takes what they need, no more. On fasting days, when the church's calendar dictates abstinence from meat or dairy, your meals become even simpler. Fish on Fridays, a soup of herbs and root vegetables, nothing more. The rhythm of these constraints weaves into the fabric of daily life, a reminder of faith and discipline that shapes your eating habits as surely as the seasons shape the harvest. You might chuckle at the thought of modern dining, those endless buffets, the fast food chains offering gourmet versions of what once was a humble staple. Here, no one expects a plate piled high. Instead, the meal is a quiet act of necessity, a pause in the relentless march of work and worry. The bread, dense and rough, is a carrier of flavors, sometimes dipped in a splash of vinegar or spread with a smear of preserved onion. The flavor of the stew, thick and earthy, fills your mouth with the taste of survival. Nothing fancy, just enough to keep your strength for another day. As you eat, the marketplace outside hums with life. You hear the shouts of vendors hawking their goods, barrels of malt, fresh herbs packed into bundles, bright oranges imported from distant lands. The baker's voice rises above the din, calling out the price of loaves. "A penny each, fresh from the oven," while the smell of warm bread mingles with the sharp tang of vinegar and the smoky scent of roasted fish. The market is a riot of colors and sounds, a chaotic symphony of life that feeds both your body and your curiosity. You see the baker's flour-dusted hands shaping dough, the merchant weighing spices on a scale, the peddler offering sweet dried figs or bitter almonds. Even in this modest setting, the bustle reveals a community thriving on exchange, on barter and survival. The table, as a stage, is a subtle display of social standing. Nobles and wealthy merchants sit with fine cloths and silver utensils, their plates piled high with delicacies. You, and many like you, gather around simpler, sturdier boards, sharing what little you have. Yet, despite the disparity, the act of eating together fosters a strange camaraderie, an unspoken understanding that, for a moment, everyone is equal beneath the shared need for nourishment. Waste is rare. Leftovers are saved, repurposed into next day's broth, or fed to the animals. You learn to read a lot from those scraps, what's valued, what's discarded, what's a sign of abundance or austerity. The hunger that gnaws at your belly sharpens your senses. Every taste, every aroma, every crumb becomes a fleeting treasure. After the last spoonful, as you wipe your hands on a rough cloth, you feel the satisfying heaviness in your stomach, a quiet, persistent reminder of life's simple gifts. The city outside begins to stir, the streets filling with movement, voices, and laughter. Soon, the day will give way to evening, and the promise of music, storytelling, and small acts of defiance against the encroaching dark will beckon. The table, once a humble platform of necessity, has woven a thread of human connection, an act of resilience amid hardship, a ritual that keeps the spirit fed even when the belly is full, only in fleeting moments. And as you rise, dusting crumbs from your tunic, you know that beneath the weight of scarcity lies a profound truth, that breaking bread together is one of the oldest, simplest acts of hope and community, and quiet rebellion against the silence of despair. O ar se enche de cheiro morno de cerveja recém-borrifada, misturado ao perfume de serragem molhada, que gruda na pele e na roupa, carregada da esperança e do cansaço de mais um dia. As sombras alongam-se, alongando também as risadas contidas, os murmúrios e o tilintar de canecas de metal que se chocam em celebrações silenciosas. Você sente o peso de um dia de trabalho ou de cuidados, mas também a promessa de momentos de alívio, escondidos entre as portas de madeira de uma taverna acolhedora. Ao entrar, o cheiro de lenha que queima na lareira aquece o espaço, enquanto o brilho trêmulo das velas reflete nos copos e nas caras suadas de quem, como você, busca uma breve fuga da rotina sombria. Os bancos de madeira, bambos e irregulares rangem sob os corpos de homens e mulheres que conversam em vozes que sobem e descem, ora altas, ora sussurradas, como uma onda que nunca se aquieta completamente. O jogo de dados, as peças de Nine Men's Morris e os copos de cerveja aguada criam um cenário de esperança e de promessas de sorte, ou de azar. O dado que rola como promessa de sorte e cai igual boleto no fim do mês, pensa você, com um sorriso irônico. Aqui, a aposta é no acaso, e o risco acompanha cada jogada, como uma lembrança de que a vida também é uma questão de probabilidades. Você se aproxima de um canto onde um alaúde desafinado, uma rabeca e uma flauta se unem numa melodia que desafia a noite, enquanto as botas marcam um ritmo simples e constante na poeira do chão. Um grupo de pessoas se reúne em roda, suas vozes entrelaçadas em passos que parecem improvisados, mas carregam uma tradição ancestral. Você participa, balançando o corpo ao som, sentindo o suor doce escorrer pela testa, enquanto a música se mistura ao aroma de ervas queimadas e de vinho mal passado. A dança é uma celebração silenciosa da esperança, uma tentativa de desafiar a escuridão que ronda a cidade. Mais ao fundo, um palco improvisado revela uma peça de teatro de moralidade, com figurinos toscos e gestos exagerados, encenando milagres ou mistérios que fazem o público rir ou silenciar-se reverente. Você observa as figuras encenando um episódio de um santo milagroso, ou a história de um herói que vence o mal, tudo sob o olhar atento de uma multidão que, por um momento, esquece o medo e se deixa envolver pela magia do espetáculo. Nas noites de festa, o calendário religioso dita o ritmo. Festas de colheita, São João com suas fogueiras e procissões iluminadas por velas e ervas aromáticas. Você vê velas tremulando, os rostos escondidos sob máscaras decoradas, passos ritmados por cânticos e salmos que ecoam pelas ruas, enquanto o cheiro de cera derretida mistura-se ao perfume de flores e incenso. As procissões avançam devagar, carregando figuras sacras, enquanto o povo, entre orações e risos, busca proteção, ou agradecimento. Mas nem tudo é luz nesta noite. Quando a celebração se aproxima do seu clímax, você percebe a sombra de um grupo de flagelantes, seus corpos marcados e suas vozes cortando o silêncio com sermões que parecem mais uma penitência do que uma mensagem. Eles caminham em procissão, com cordas e chicotes, em um ritual que mistura fé e medo, uma expressão visceral da busca por purificação. Alguns observam com curiosidade, outros com respeito ou desconforto, enquanto as execuções públicas ou atos exemplares acontecem em praças próximas, uma espécie de teatro de punição que mantém a cidade na corda bamba entre a esperança e o temor. Você, como alguém que conhece os riscos das doenças e do medo, lança um olhar de respeito ou de cautela. Talvez toque à beira de um telhado, onde um familiar ou um colega te pede um conselho, um sinal de esperança ou de proteção. Você sopra suavemente na ponta de uma vela ou passa a mão na testa de alguém como quem afasta maus presságios, sabendo que, nesta cidade, até a alegria tem seu preço. Uma sombra de inquietação sempre presente. Entre risos e cânticos, entre passos desajeitados e preces sussurradas, a noite avança, carregando consigo uma mistura de emoções. Aqui, o riso desafia a escuridão, a dança desafia a morte, e o espetáculo de vida acontece sob a vigilância silenciosa do sino distante, que lembra que toda festa, por mais vibrante, conhece o peso do silêncio que logo se aproxima. E, no meio de tudo isso, você percebe que, mesmo quando a alegria parece plena, a cidade guarda seu segredo mais antigo. Tudo começa e tudo termina, como uma roda de feira que gira, inevitável, eterna. Quando a última nota se apaga, o sino responde, lembrando que toda festa conhece o preço do silêncio. Rimos, dançamos, vivemos, e ainda assim, a cidade guarda seu costume mais antigo: nascer, prometer, partir. A luz tênue da vela, quase consumida, lança uma chama branda que dança devagar, refletindo a simplicidade de um mundo antigo, onde tudo nasce e tudo se despede sob o olhar atento das estrelas. Você se lembra do primeiro choro, como um sino minúsculo que anunciava a chegada de uma nova vida, carregada de esperança e de medo. Naquele instante, uma alma era acolhida na vastidão do tempo, envolta em panos ásperos, sob o murmúrio de palavras de oração sussurradas pela parteira. Uma celebração silenciosa do milagre de existir, mesmo diante da fragilidade. Cada nascimento é uma promessa, um fio de esperança que se entrelaça com o destino, tecendo uma tapeçaria de vidas que crescem, amam e se despedem, como as ondas que vêm e vão na maré. Você conhece bem essas promessas, os anéis de prata, as fitas coloridas, o pão e o sal que selam alianças na porta da igreja, testemunhas de uma união sagrada que dura enquanto os anos permitirem. E ainda assim, cada beijo, cada troca de olhares carrega a certeza de que tudo é passageiro. Uma dança sutil entre o tempo que nos sustenta e o que nos leva embora. O trabalho, o ofício transmitido de geração em geração, permanece como um banco marcado por histórias que o tempo não apaga. A avó que ensina a afiar lã, o homem que passa de pai para filho a arte de montar uma armadilha ou cuidar do campo. No silêncio do lar, objetos carregam memórias, uma ferramenta de madeira, um bordado, uma peça de louça manchada pelo uso, cada um contando a sua história na quietude de um dia que se repete. Como uma lembrança de que tudo passa, mesmo o mais simples, a doença chega de repente, como uma sombra que se estende silenciosa. Você, se for médico ou curandeiro, se encontra entre a esperança e a impotência, entre o cuidado delicado de unções e orações e a dura realidade do peso do silêncio, quando as palavras parecem se perder na pressa de despedir-se. Os momentos finais são feitos de rezas murmuradas, o cheiro de ervas e de óleo, mãos que se acariciam, tentando aliviar a dor que o corpo, por mais forte que seja, não consegue esconder. Quando o último suspiro se esvai, uma campainha grave ressoa na distância, anunciando que a hora chegou. Uma despedida que não necessita de rituais grandiosos, apenas do reconhecimento de que a vida, como a luz de uma vela, sempre diminui, mas o calor permanece. O funeral é uma procissão curta, o chão coberto de terra fria, as velas que pingam cera como lágrimas silenciosas, enquanto a comunidade se reúne para prestar a última homenagem. Nomes são chamados, preces sussurradas, um simples ato de memória, porque, neste mundo, a morte é uma presença que ensina a humildade. Somos passageiros, todos sob o mesmo céu, todos feitos de carne e esperança. Nos vitrais das igrejas e nos afrescos de dança macabra, as figuras de caveiras lembram com suavidade que a humildade está na finitude, uma lição antiga, eterna, que o tempo não consegue apagar. Como as folhas que caem no outono, tudo que nasce um dia se despede, e neste ciclo encontramos a beleza de um mistério que nos acolhe. A vida, por mais breve que seja, é um milagre que se repete a cada manhã. Cada pão partido, cada caneca erguida, cada riso compartilhado num beco silencioso. Você fecha a janela, escuta o sussurrar do vento e sente o peso doce de tudo que passou. A cidade continua, as estrelas permanecem imóveis e você, com o coração leve, se permite descansar. Entre sinos e sussurros, há descanso. Agora é a sua vez de dormir.